This is Perspectivas Latinas, a community service of CAN TV. I'm Juan Carlos Hernandez. Many people in our city make a living by selling food out of carts on the street. They do so without the support or approval of City Hall or many others, except, of course, their customers. Our guests today are here to talk about the challenges street vendors face and how they have been working for change. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our first guest here is Vicky Lugo, and you are the Vice President of AVA, or the Association of, bueno, en español, Asociación de Vendedores Ambulantes, Street Vendors Association.
Yes.
Tell me about yourself and how you became part of this organization.
Well, it's a long story. Well, not long story, but over a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
As a kid, a street vendor was getting arrested coming out of church.
You saw this?
Know. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not know what was going on. I heard, through the rumors, I heard the people saying that he didn't have a license to sell the cut fruit. As a child, not knowing, the laws and everything, I couldn't do anything about it. But then an opportunity came several years ago where street vendors from back of the yards neighborhood were being kicked out because the new police commander came in. And so I started to get involved. I started to go to the meetings, and I would see that, I saw that there was a lot of people, a lot of structure that they were lacking, particularly with the language barrier, because most street vendors are Spanish speaking.
Structure within the organization.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to get more involved into the organization. 4 years ago, I started, getting involved, and here I am.
Wow.
Still fighting.
4 years later.
Yes.
Still fighting. Welcome again.
Thank you.
Our second guest today is Brooke Fallon. Welcome, and you are with Institute for Justice Clinic on Entrepreneurship.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So the IJ Clinic on Entrepreneurship is actually part of a national nonprofit called the Institute for Justice. Mm-hmm. And what the Institute for Justice does is really work to kind of promote people's right to economic liberty across the country. So, your right to earn an honest living, in the job of your choice, your right to free speech, your right to own property. And here in Chicago, our office has a really kind of specialized and local mission that we're really focusing on trying to help especially lower income entrepreneurs in Chicago get the resources and the training that they need to get their businesses off the ground. So we offer pro bono legal assistance to local entrepreneurs and free trainings. And then another big piece of what we do is advocacy work to sort of make it easier for businesses that are looking to get started. And anyone who's ever tried to start a business in Chicago knows that there can be a lot of hoops to jump through. Getting a license can be really confusing and difficult, and we're here to really advocate on behalf of those entrepreneurs who can't afford to pay lawyers and expediters to get through these processes. And we really want to kind of open up opportunities for them to earn a living doing what they love. And that's how we initially kind of connected with Vicky and Ava in the work that they were doing to legalize selling food from food carts in Chicago. Mm-hmm.
How big of an issue is this? I know it's been an issue for a while now, but now that I see food trucks out there and other folks getting those permits and being allowed to sell and make a living that way, I was thinking, wow, those street vendors with carts should probably be or will be allowed soon. That was my assumption. Mm-hmm. Is that what's happening, or what's going on with this issue? How big is it right now?
Well, it's been going on for many years. Mm-hmm. AVA has organized for over 20 years.
Over 20 years.
Yeah, and because it's always been a fight, particularly with city inspectors and police officers, more with police officers.
Really?
Yeah, because they are the ones that are enforcing the law. And so they basically can do whatever they want with street vendors when it comes to either writing tickets, or calling the inspectors, or calling streets and sanitation to come and take the vendors' carts and their food, to intimidating, saying that they're going to call immigration on street vendors. So it's been a long fight, and so we have organized vendors. We try to get them the licenses that are available right now. But more so right now, our fight is to be able to push an ordinance that would allow them to legally sell food on the streets without being, without having that fear of getting arrested, getting ticketed, or anything like that.
I'm curious though. You said police are at the forefront of this fight. Obviously, they get their orders from somewhere else. How does IJ Center, IJ Clinic for
It's a long name, I know.
Entrepreneurship? That's okay. How do you step in when the police tickets somebody or Streets and Sanitation takes somebody's cart? What happens then? I mean, I'm sure these folks, like she mentioned, many of them are undocumented, don't speak English. What happens then? What do you do?
So we're really kind of focused on solving this problem on sort of a larger level.
Okay.
So, you know, Vicky hears from the vendors when they're getting ticketed, when they're getting harassed, and to a lot of vendors it can seem like, you know, this thing that's kind of happened to them individually, that they've been harassed and they've experienced an altercation with the police. But we're here to really show that there's actually a larger, more systemic problem, that you know, it's a real issue, that there's no way for these vendors to get a license to do this business right now. And a big problem is there's really uneven enforcement, and I think that's where the police piece really comes in, that, you know, since it's technically illegal for these vendors to be selling food from a cart on the street, there are some wards where the aldermen, you know, especially in the kind of predominantly Latino wards, the aldermen might say, hey, we'll look the other way because it's an important piece of our culture. We'll kind of let the vendors get out there and sell. But that doesn't actually offer any real protection for the vendors. It's just sort of this, you know, spoken agreement. So, you know, when the cops, you might have a certain cop who's out there who decides they want to start enforcing the fact that
They just decide on their own, even though there's a spoken agreement. It's like,
it's hard because yes, you have this sort of spoken agreement with no actual rules in place. So, you know, we've talked to vendors who it's really confusing too, that maybe you'll be okay and you won't be bothered if you're on this corner, but then, you know, if you're down the street over here, you know, there might be a cop around there who does want to enforce this. So it creates this really weird environment where the vendors are kind of operating, you know, almost in the shadows and just hoping that whatever cop is on the street that day decides not to bother them. And so we're really looking to, you know, put an ordinance in place that will allow the vendors an opportunity to, you know, get a license and to feel safe doing what they're doing, since no one wants to be out there, you know, worried about getting arrested, worried about getting harassed. They're just out there trying to earn for their families. So we really want to give them an opportunity to do that.
Definitely, and I definitely wanted to talk about some of the details in the ordinance that it was introduced this past May, right, May of 2014, but it hasn't moved, but we'll definitely get into those details. I still want to talk more about that relationship, uneven enforcement that these vendors are facing, and how they obviously responded with AVA, but when something happens to, let's say I'm a vendor and I'm not necessarily part of AVA, but I'm out there with my car and I know sometimes cops are looking out and maybe to ticket me, or I also read that sometimes they throw chlorine on food.
Yes, they have done that.
That happens to me. What can I do? Or what support can I get from somebody like AVA, or like immediate, that's not a bigger systemic answer?
Well, AVA is an organization that will help out any vendor, whether they are part of the organization or have heard of the organization but never really been involved. AVA will help out any vendor, especially in these types of cases, because we know that this is a crucial time for that vendor who might get intimidated, might get forced to, you know, whether if immigration is involved or anything like that, they can be intimidated into, you know, being deported or voluntary leave. And so we want to stop that from happening. We organize vendors. We let them know about what's going on, what their rights are. And in cases like these, when there's a vendor who is not part of AVA is being arrested, we, the members, get together. We do protests. We've done protests. 2 years ago, there was a vendor who was arrested, a female. And I mean, it has happened so many times. 2 years ago, over 100 vendors were ticketed. Eight vendors were arrested, and 2 of those vendors were minors.
Really?
Yes. And it has gotten to the point where the police officers are intimidating the vendors so bad, to the point where they say, you know, they're going to call immigration on them. They
And
curse.
do they called immigration? Does it work that way where ICE can just come in?
It doesn't work that way, thankfully, here in Illinois, but just listening to a police officer tell you, I'm going to call immigration on you, is something that will worry the heck out of everybody.
Right, right.
You know,
Especially when you
anyone.
have children, your
Right.
family, and you're like, what's going to happen to them? And so
Yeah.
you kind of try to hide away.
Right, and so what we have done is, like I said, organized vendors. We have done workshops where the IJ clinic was part of that workshop. We go with vendors to court dates when they have court dates. But in the courts, it's weird. It's not controlled the way it should be, because depending on the agent that we get, they will either dismiss the ticket, or they will say you have to pay $70, or you have to pay $200, $500. Vendors have paid up to $1,500
$1,500
per ticket.
Per
Yes,
ticket.
Yes. And so there is no regulation or no like way of knowing exactly how much you're going to get. It depends on that agent that is there, and so
whether you've angered them or
Yes.
or they're
Whether
having
they're
a good
having
day.
a bad day.
Right,
Right.
Yeah.
good or bad day, and
right. And so we have kind of like, you know, we have because the police officer writes different codes, and then it
wow.
writes the wording differently. So we have gotten all of these, you know, little details, things, to where we know, okay, it has to say this code, and it has to say this language. And from there, we have been able to move on to being able to either dismiss the tickets, or the vendor has to pay very little. So organizing has helped a lot, has helped many vendors. And you know, we help anyone that needs any kind of help.
Okay. And what happens when somebody's arrested? And tell me about that, because that, for a minor or somebody without documents, that could not just, certainly the intimidation strikes fear into you, but being arrested, you know, being handcuffed and taken away, I mean, that could
Yes.
just cause you to panic, because you're just all these scenarios playing through your mind. What do you do then?
Right. We had a vendor 2 years ago who was arrested, a female vendor, and she had her proper documentation. She had the licenses that that were available. She had her identification with her, and we were called because she was being arrested. So I wasn't able to be there at that moment, but one of our other organizers, and the president of the organization, was able to be there. They were taking pictures, they were recording everything, but even so, the vendor was arrested. And when she was taken to the jail, we got about 30, 40 vendors. We made an emergency meeting. We went to the police station where she was taken to. We kind of stormed in there peacefully, and we kind of
Started in there
stormed
peacefully.
into the police.
More like marched, maybe.
And you know, we spoke with the commander there. We were told she wasn't there. The vendor wasn't there.
They lied to you?
No, they didn't lie to us. They told us that because they don't have a women's holding section, they had transferred her to another station on Kedzie in Flournoy, I believe, or Harrison.
Okay.
And so all our vendors went to that police station. We were about to go into the
Did you storm in there too?
Sort of, yeah.
Only peacefully.
But
Yeah.
like as soon as we started heading towards the door, one of the officers came out and said, hey, okay, what's going on, and so we kind of intimidated the police, and so anyway, the officer said, okay, she's going to be let go in about 5 minutes, and yeah, about 5 minutes she was let go, and we had our vendor back with us. She was scared. She was very
Obviously so,
nervous.
yeah,
She
yeah.
was shaking, but she was
imagine.
out.
She was out.
She was out, and she went to court, and she didn't have to pay anything.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Great news for her, but others have not been so fortunate.
Right.
Which is one of the reasons why this ordinance would be a huge help to all these folks. Tell me about the ordinance and how it came about. Is it based on something that was created already, something that's available to other vendors like the food truck folks? Tell me about that, please. Brooke.
Yeah, so it's interesting in Chicago, although people aren't allowed to sell prepared foods from carts for the most part, there are certain parts of the code that allow you to do certain things. So we actually based our ordinance off the frozen dessert license, which allows you to sell prepared, prepackaged frozen desserts from a cart. So we kind of figured if you can sell things that you keep cold at the right temperature from a cart, you should be able to do the same with hot foods that are kept at the proper temperature. So we kind of built off that existing ordinance in order to draft ours up. So with this ordinance, it does require that the food be prepared in some type of licensed kitchen, which is definitely, a challenge and a big change from the way that vendors are doing things now.
Because most of them work out of their home kitchens. Because
yes.
that's convenient, it's cheap, it's there, right?
Yes, definitely. So it's hard because that's kind of even on a state level, there's all sorts of rules about not being able to just kind of cook from your own kitchen. So so that's a part of our ordinance, and we're working with other organizations in the coalition to see what we can do about finding affordable kitchen space that vendors might be able to use. So that's a big part of our ordinance, and in drafting it, we were really trying to focus on sort of what can we put together that sort of meets those health and safety requirements that the health department is going to be looking for, but doesn't add any sort of extra or unnecessary burden to the vendors. So what can we do that's a straightforward ordinance that could be easy for the vendors and anyone else who's interested to understand, but kind of still satisfies those rules. And that's how we came up with this ordinance that allows vendors to sell food from push carts and different types of non-motorized vehicles and bicycle carts and things like that. But like I said, they're required to kind of prepare the food in some sort of licensed kitchen and have it prepackaged, and it has to be kept at temperature. Those are kind of the typical sort of health rules. And some of the other kind of parts or licenses that we looked at too were, Chicago's a really huge festival city. Everyone knows Chicago for its street fest.
Right.
And so there's a whole sort of system for putting those street festivals together, and you go there and you see people preparing food on the street and selling it from tables at these different street festivals like the Taste of Chicago or whatever else. So that's already going on in the park system. You can sell prepared food from a cart, because the park district concessions are run by sort of a separate corporation, a private corporation that gives people those licenses. So we kind of were looking at what's already allowed in different parts of Chicago, and how can we sort of translate that into something that would work for the vendors so that they could sell prepared food from carts around the city of Chicago.
Okay.
And
who've been your allies within the city council or with or in other nonprofits? Who's come out to say we'll lend you a hand, we'll speak on your behalf?
Yeah, I think, in this issue, one of the things that's been really attractive about it for people kind of beyond us who are really looking to serve the vendors is, you hear a lot in Chicago about the problem of food deserts and food access in a lot of, especially in a lot of Latino and African American neighborhoods. And, we've really shown that these vendors are bringing fresh, local food into neighborhoods, into places that might not have a lot of grocery store access, might not have a lot of cheap food on the go. So we've definitely worked with some different organizations that are interested in that aspect of it, that if people are allowed to sell prepared food from a cart, you know, yes, that could be tamales, but it could also be salads. It could also be, you know, vegetable stir fries. It could be all sorts of things that
You just expand the menu.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, you could, you know, if you open the opportunity up, it's only limited by the vendor's imagination, really. So
Right.
it could be a great way in a lot of neighborhoods across Chicago to get, you know, more food into the area. We've even talked to a group in Woodlawn who's interested in kind of attracting mobile food to a corridor over there where there's not a lot of brick and mortar businesses, because they figure if they can build this kind of culture where people are coming to eat, then that expands foot traffic and kind of proves that there's a demand, so that maybe you'll have some restaurants and some stores that want to open up there too. So I think a lot of organizations have seen this as a really cool stepping stone to kind of even help revitalize neighborhoods, bring healthy food, bring jobs, kind of attract, you know, keep dollars in those neighborhoods. So I think it provides a lot of cool opportunities for people interested in all sorts of areas of economic development in Chicago.
And do you think this ordinance is going to move forward? It's stalled right now, right? It hasn't gone anywhere. It was introduced in May by
Alderman Maldonado.
Maldonado, yes, but it hasn't gone anywhere. So what are you hoping to do, or how are you hoping to move forward?
Well,
Vicky?
we're trying to gain more support right now. There's been several things that have happened in City Council which have led us to like now November and still nothing. But we do have a lot of support from many aldermen.
That's good to hear.
Yes, but particularly the ones from the licensing committee. But we're also getting more support from other organizations, but more importantly from street vendors. We have had several community meetings, but we also want to. What we want to do is know what street vendors think about this ordinance, because like Brooke mentioned that the ordinance requires vendors to prepare their products from a licensed kitchen, and so that is another leg of the ordinance that is kind of like worrying a lot of vendors, because many of these shared kitchens are very expensive. They're overbooked, and you know, it's really hard, or they're in distant places where vendors can't have access to these locations. And so, you know, that's one of the things that we're also working on, is creating a shared kitchen in the community, in Little Village, but we want to expand it as well into other neighborhoods. That's really, you know, we want to know what street vendors think, and if it's, you know, if it's good, if it's something they could abide by. And so that's what we're working on right now.
Well, it sounds
Yeah.
great. You want to add
Oh, I was
something?
going to say, yeah, I think right now it's really about just kind of like Vicky said, building that support. You know, we, unfortunately, in this issue, we are kind of the little guy. We don't have a lot of money. We don't have a lot of power. So, you know, when you don't have a lot of maybe traditional power behind you, you got to get people power. So we're really looking to kind of mobilize the vendors, mobilize people who care about these issues, who care about economic development and food access and immigrant issues. And the more we can kind of get people together, have people contact their aldermen and put pressure on them to show them that, hey, this is an issue that affects a lot of us and that a lot of us care about. Because, you know, in city council, the aldermen are focused on so many different issues, and it can be tough to capture their attention. So we've found that we've gotten more attention at times when we've gotten more attention from kind of the community at large. Like when we were in the spring, when we were hosting a bunch of community town hall meetings, we were able to attract a bunch of local press and get a lot of coverage, and that really helped get the attention, because, you know, if suddenly the Tribune and the Sun-Times are writing about it, then the aldermen start to notice. And so the more we can kind of keep energy within the movement, the more we can show that a lot of the aldermen's constituents care about this issue. That really, I think, is what we need to do to kind of give them that extra push to bring it to a hearing.
Well, that's awesome. And it's great to hear that you're all working and pushing forward despite the challenges, I'm sure, that the challenges that have been around for, like you said, 20 years. Well, thank you for being here. We're out of time, but I hope to keep talking to you and hope to wish you well with all your work and hope to have you here again soon.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much. Thank you
much.
for having us here.
And to you, thank you for joining us. Perspectivas Latinas is a community service of CAN TV. If your nonprofit organization would like to work with CAN TV, call 312-738-1400 and ask for nonprofit services. Tune into Perspectivas Latinas for local issues and concerns every Thursday at 8:30 p.m. on CAN TV 21. I'm Juan Carlos Hernandez. Thank you for joining us.